Call of Cthulhu, Shadow of the Comet, is a remarkably interesting game, in my opinion. Now, it came out in the 1990s, about 1993, and I'll admit, I wasn't drawn to it at first. Of course, I was also more concerned with finishing high school and starting college at the time it came out. Of course, I saw it later in stores. Notably, I remember seeing it at Tower Records down in King of Prussia. I think that's probably gone by now. I haven't been around there, and at least I hadn't gone as far as there in years. But it was an interesting game to play when I heard about it and finally got a chance to play it. Now, it was from Infogrammes, published by Infogrammes, well, developed by Infogrammes, I should say, which literally makes it a sister series, maybe a sister game of the Alone in the Dark series. Now, that's ironic because Alone in the Dark was designed to be, well, it used 3D polygon characters. This was not done with this one. In fact, Shadow of the Comet was done more in a 2D sense. Now, when I first played it, I'll admit I wasn't necessarily a fan of the interface. Of course, if you do it without a manual, the interface has to be learned. And I had to learn it. However, I came to enjoy it, although certain parts of it were very tricky. Now, it has some nods to previous works of influence. It takes place in the town of Ilsmith, which is an obvious reference to Innsmouth. And it combines aspects from some of Lovecraft's works. You go there in part due to an astrological event happening. It's set in 1910, which was when Halley's Comet had one of its trips around the Earth so it could be seen. And lo and behold, everybody reacts. Now, I should say everyone reacts, but apparently due to something that happened years ago, same time, well, around the same events, one explorer, scientist, whatever you want to call him, well, he disappeared around that time. And so, not only is this for photography's sake of such a spectacular event, but it's also a mystery solving. And with any Lovecraftian story, we delve into the old ones. Now, there were things that really amazed me when I play this game, and one of which is how some of the characters looked. Now, if you follow movies or anything like that, you will recognize certain names and faces. And when our protagonist goes to Ilsmith, he is allowed to lodge with the town's doctor, who has a strict resemblance, serious resemblance to Vincent Price. Another of the town's denizens has a striking resemblance to Jack Nicholson in one of his various roles. So I don't know how they got away with using that, if they had to pay for likenesses and that. But it added a nice little touch of realism to it. And usually when there's interactions between the characters, you get some sort of close-up to the characters. That's another nice thing they did with this game. However, and I will admit, there was something else that I did like about this, and that is that they used some sort of interface. I mean, most of the game was done in a two-dimensional format, like the old style games. You can have, well, you couldn't necessarily have a character walking back and forth and changing in size. What they did pull off, however, because of white bars that are located on the bottom of your screen, that is an area where you can basically step out of the screen like you're walking forward on a stage. And I think this had a little bit of a 3D element to it, even though the game doesn't fully have a 3D element. And there's certain puzzles and, of course, certain triggers for certain events in the game. And I think that was a beautiful touch. Now, it also made brilliant use of jump scares. For moments when you're going to die in the game, you really get a close-up of what is attacking you and killing you. And you also get a close-up of some when you have to eliminate certain characters in the game who are linked to the old ones, and you get an appropriately Lovecraftian jump scare. And that adds to the effect of the game. And this game was brilliant. I think in certain ways it was a true testament of what they could pull off in a 2D environment. The story is remarkably standalone. And unlike a lot of Lovecraftian stories, while you have a decent ending to it, well, you have actually an ending which looks pretty much positive. Most Lovecraft stories don't necessarily have a negative tone, a positive ending. There's always a looming, you survived, but that's not the end of it feel to it. And this one actually has a positive feeling at the end of it. In fact, once the story is over, you have the character start to relay the story to his publisher, which is amazing, and it adds to it. Now, there are, of course, some difficulties with it. The menus, the object use system, I don't think was entirely the best. And what can hinder it is when you finally make it to the final scene of the game, the final moments, where the entity could break through, which would mean that everything you've done was for naught. And what ends up, I mean, unless you are well aware of what you have to do, you got to move quick. I mean, you got to be starting it just before you have to start it. I know that makes no sense the way I said it there, but it is how it feels. And if I was reading something that it was not necessarily done to support mouse. And, well, in the days of early computers, a mouse was not commonplace yet. I mean, see, my first computer, when I got it, it had basically, it was all you got was your tower, your computer unit, your monitor, and a keyboard. Although the monitor was separate. Keyboard always came with the computer. You want a mouse? Oh, that's extra. And you have to have certain software to run it. And then, of course, as things progressed and we had the Windows operating system take off and everybody saw how useful a mouse was with a Macintosh, well, everybody got into it. Now, even when you get a computer nowadays, it comes with a mouse, a keyboard. So a mouse has become, instead of an extra, it's become an essential. So, of course, the early games were not designed to work with a mouse interface. And there's still some games that still don't necessarily need a mouse interface, but this is one where it could be useful to have the mouse interface. I know I thought it was useful to have the mouse interface. I still don't know how you could have pulled it off with just a keyboard interface. But apparently you could. And I gotta say this. The story to it is nicely designed, in my opinion. You have some interesting backstories with some of the character interactions, and there's probably some alternate things you could do to progress in the game. But, and given everything, who your characters are and the backstory, it just adds to the involvement in the game. And it helps set the time, too. Now, as I said, this game was designed to have a standalone story. However, they felt the need to be able to reference it, and in some ways could link another game to it. However, I'm not going to go into that right now. That's for later. But as its own, this was a brilliant game that they made. I would have wished that they had maybe done something similar to the Alone in the Dark franchise. However, this still did work very well, in my opinion, and made a great story. The way to transition and move about was nicely done, especially with the addition of the quote, those white bars to show you where you could go forward. And it was a very captivating story, and it utilized close-ups and quote jump scares very nicely for a game made in the early 90s. And I have to agree, using actors' likenesses in the game, or people's likenesses in the game, I think did more to help it. Although they could have probably worked a little bit on keeping the text in line with the speech. You're still going through the character's done speaking, and you're still reading all the text that they spoke. So, that could be something. But overall, I thought this was a very good game, and I do recommend you getting it and taking some time to play it, learn the interface, experience it. I'd also recommend finding a walkthrough for it too, because while some of the things are not necessarily intuitive, it can be helpful when you come to the point where you need to do things quickly. And that's all I have to say about Call of Cthulhu: Shadow of the Comet. Now, if you've listened to this far, thank you very much. Give it a like if you like. Check out my playthrough of Call of Cthulhu: Shadow of the Comet. You actually hear how I go from not liking the interface to liking it. Also, check out some of the other videos on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it. Give this video a like, as I said, and check out the other playthroughs I've done. Check out the other retrospectives I've done. And until next time, this is Rich Kale here on YouTube, Rich Gen X elsewhere. Goodbye.